Hello, my name is Jose Paez, and this report and project is for MAN 4900, Capstone for Supervision and Management. I decided to base my report on offshoring and its effects on customer service. My report will go over a little bit of the background, the situation in today's economy with offshoring, and some of the things to look forward to as a supervisor in a future career in regards to offshoring. So I'll start off a little bit with the background of offshoring. I wouldn't say that offshoring, though, is the latest trend, but that it has been a trend that seems to only increase as the decades move along without much decline. As far as the research predicts, 3.3 million white-collar jobs will move offshore by 2015. Now, the tremors to the U.S. economy caused by offshoring can feel more like an earthquake if you are a small domestic manufacturer. Competing in the global marketplace is on the mind of many small business owners who proposed just 10 years ago and who are now fighting for survival. The cost of offshoring has been high, with numerous plant closings and more than 3 million U.S. manufacturing jobs lost since 2000, many due to offshoring. Yet offshoring is nothing new, and history shows America has both benefited and been harmed by it. Prior to the Revolutionary War, almost all manufacturing goods in colonial America were imported from England. At that time, England had a labor surplus, and to protect English factories and workers, Parliament passed laws prohibiting the manufacture of any goods in the colonies that could be made in England. The result was that practically all consumer goods and most industrial goods in the colonies were made offshore. After the Revolutionary War, America needed to create its own manufacturing infrastructure, primarily because of the high cost of these imported goods. To accomplish this task, many American manufacturing began copying English industrial machinery. This started with Samuel Slater copying the Arkwright spinning frame. Even Eli Whitney will help from his friend Thomas Jefferson copy the concept of interchangeable parts from his Frenchman Honor Blanc. Later, we copied practically all imported English products, just as some Asian factories copy current American machinery and products today. We copied English products and industrial machinery in colonial America. In the 1800s, Americans needed to improve manufacturing productivity, in part driven by a short of skilled labor, resulting in factories applying the first mass production method. The consequences was that the U.S. factories were able to outproduce and outprice the European competition. This allowed American goods to gain market share, and in a swing of the global pendulum, American began shipping goods to Europe. To European manufacturers and factory workers, we were the China and India of the 1800s. Of course, there was a downside. Working conditions in some of those early American factories were atrocious, sometimes being worse than what we read about today in third world countries. Child labor and slavery were commonplace, which further reduced the cost of both factory and agricultural goods, but also became blight on our national echelon. The trend of upward American manufacturing productivity and lower costs continued through the Industrial Revolution and in the 1900s. American manufacturing power and innovation led to the world and was exemplified by the introduction in 1909 of Henry Ford's Model T automobile. Henry Ford's innovations, which included the development of the assembly line, allowed him to surpass his competition in manufacturing productivity. This improvement allowed Ford to continually reduce the price of the Model T from $950 in 1909 to $290 in 1926. This ability to continuously lower the price of the Model T resulted in increased global market share for Ford, but Ford didn't stop there. Just as Honda and Toyota today operate factories in North America, Ford built factories in Europe to manufacture his automobiles, to the dismay of his European competition. The summit of American manufacturing productivity continued through the 1950s, but the pendulum began its return swing within 20 years after World War II. In the 1960s, American manufacturing productivity became effectively stagnant. At the same time, Japanese companies, having learned, adapted, and later improving upon U.S. methods of manufacturing, Toyota sent engineers to Ford's Rouge factory to learn the manufacturing methods, where productivity and more affordable products then could be made in the U.S. Like Rip Van Winkle, American industry slept while our offshore competitors passed us by. By the 1980s and 1990s, our lack of manufacturing competitiveness began to manifest itself by the closing of U.S. factories. It started with companies moving their manufacturing operations near shore to Mexico. When it was discovered that relocating to Asia could lower costs even more, manufacturers moved offshore. And that's just a little bit about the history of offshoring and has how it has affected, in this part, mainly the U.S. economy and job opportunities and so forth. I mean, it's kind of incredible how, during the Revolutionary War, how England passed those laws that um, the United States could not manufacture anything, that they had to get it from England, and now, you know, England fought for those rights to be able to do them here in the United States, or in regards to the 13 colonies back then, to the point that now they're still, they prefer to offshore anyway. So we went back to how it originally started at the beginning. Um, but once again, that's just some of the background of offshoring. The reason why offshoring, or I chose offshoring for this class project and report and speech, is because this subject is important because the policies and practices that result in American jobs being moved abroad and in huge amounts of cheaper goods being imported continue to be the subject of controversy, though the technological change has also played a strong role in the upheaval over the two-decade period leading up to the early 2000s. Some 6 million U.S. manufacturing jobs were lost, many because the offshoring of business functions to cheaper labor markets by American companies. How this has affected wages for the U.S. manufacturing jobs that remain, however, is the subject of ongoing debate. The outsourcing of customer service to offshore providers has gotten a lot of bad press in the U.S., with reports citing language problems and exporting of jobs. But despite the potential for such reports to alienate customers, the offshoring continues to grow, driven mainly by the lower labor costs overseas. And even though we understand this is important, one of the key words in regards to this report was that the language problems and in regards to the exporting of jobs, um, customer service has taken a big hit in regards to that, because nowadays many of these call centers are actually from exports or other countries who are providing these services, which it does become of an issue with customers. They make even commercials nowadays about how customers and call centers are U.S. operated, because even now that gains consumers' wants and needs in regards to doing business just with U.S. Businesses who stay within the United States and providing those services and do not offshore. Um, in regards to the third part of the report, in regards to how do I plan to incorporate this subtopic in the future, well, I plan to incorporate the subtopic in my career by understanding how companies who offshore work, in which every project has its challenges, and having part of your team on the other side of the world only implies them, but knowing what to expect when working with an offshore group will help me avoid misunderstandings and keep the project on track. As companies try to get the most for their information technology dollar, it seems that conversation inevitably leads to the merits of offshore services. It should be no surprise that there are both advantages and disadvantages to offshore resources for some or all of our IT needs. A brief treatment for the factors involved is not likely to influence whether my company outsources to offshore, but acquainting myself with the various aspects of offshore will prepare me for what to expect and help me to more effective in my interactions of offshore is abroad, or implications can cover many cultures, types of relationships. For simplicity, the following are the advantages and disadvantages to consider and incorporate in future when working for a company who offshore, which are as follows. I broke it down into around 10, if I'm correct, different segments that as supervisors and future leaders we should consider if we happen to work for a company that's offshore. Some are good and some are bad, of course. The time difference is good. I mean, for example, let's say our main headquarters in the United States is closed due to the time frame, but the thing is, at the other part of the world, 12 hours away, it's actually daytime and we're still working and maybe those goals that we have globally. So there are some benefits time-wise, but then of course sometimes the time difference is not good, because once again, every country has cultural holidays and backgrounds and so forth that once again may cause let's say, shutdowns that we may not produce on days that in the United States it's just considered a regular day, and vice versa. Cultural communication difference can create confusion. Of course, once again, every country has its rights and its beliefs. That once again, in some countries, as you guys already know, don't like Westerners for their culture and beliefs and so forth. So that can be an issue when considering offshoring and so forth. Let's see here. High turnover is a problem. Unfortunately, being open-minded and getting adjusted first, either a short or long time frame, is not an easy task to do. So unfortunately, it does have a high turnover rate, whether it be through subordinates or managers and leaders and so forth. So it is something to consider when working for an offshore company. Different life, business experience mean different assumptions. Once again, what we consider in the United States to be a certain act, whether it be physically, verbally, and so forth, maybe consider something else overseas. So there's some of the things that we want to take into account when working overseas. Things may get lost in translation. The same things are not considered, whether it be through the English language and so forth in the United States as other countries, and other countries may assume or have a different slang towards the English language than what we do here in the United States. So there's some of the things to consider when dealing with other countries and so forth. Number 8 is good in one thing does not mean good in all. Of course, once again, I mean, for what we could consider just something normal, in other countries it could be offensive. So we have to make sure that we understand their cultures, their values, their beliefs, and so forth. Just a little side note, a little experience when I was in Dubai with the United States Navy. We couldn't put our feet facing anybody because as it was a form of respect. In the United States, we could put our legs over our knee and so forth, as a form of relaxation, and it really doesn't mean anything to anybody. But in certain countries, just the smallest thing could be an offensive and could cause loss of business when dealing with those countries. Number 9, remote communication is the norm. Once again, it comes down to being able to get adjusted, because once again, a lot of people are not able to take it. So it's not for everybody, but sometimes you may be in the middle of nowhere, and that's where the offshoring business overseas may consist of. 10, hidden costs are likely. Once again, when doing offshore, there's many things you're going to consider. Some of them are taxes, because you are going to be bringing these goods from overseas into the United States and vice versa. If you do sell globally, there's going to be other structures that you got to consider when trying to export into those countries. And I'm going to go ahead and end it with a summary of everything that we just spoke about. And now that we have come to full circle with offshoring, how it has affected customer service as a leader, the U.S. economy, from offshoring almost everything colonial America to becoming the global manufacturing powerhouse during the Industrial Revolution. Today, we are once again offshore most manufacturing goods. So where do we go from here? First, it is necessary to realize that offshoring is not good or bad. It is a business model that is a product of the world competition, and it has existed in America since colonial times. An Army officer once said, whether in war is always favorable if you know how to use it, like the weather, offshoring can work for or against us. It is also necessary to understand that offshoring has no bad guy, in the sense that there are not evil executives in smoke-filled corporate boardrooms scheming on how to fire American workers, but neither are these same executives overly concerned if American jobs are lost due to global competition. The concern is about making money, and it will always be. Furthermore, it is not about China or any other single country. As China's labor costs continue to rise, other countries will step in to take their place. When it becomes profitable in the U.S., management will simply move operations to one of these other countries to minimize manufacturing costs. To win the battle, we must roll up our sleeves and work to reduce our costs by improving our designs, improving manufacturing productivity, and improving the hands-on skills of our engineers, designers, and managers. Many domestic manufacturers are doing that now, but how much more needs to be done to keep offshoring from increasing at a high rate? And